Hey 3DMJers, this is Andrea Valdez and you're listening to the 3D Muscle Journey podcast. Today we have a big surprise Q&A for you guys. Usually we only do this every 10 episodes, but it was the rare treat last week that we had two of our head coaches together in person with our video guy on site, and it was crucial that we take advantage of that opportunity. So if you're watching on YouTube, you're probably going to have quite the visual delight of some high quality footage here as we have Brad Loomis and Jeff Alberts sitting across the table from each other, answering some of the questions that came in from our Instagram stories. The guys will be discussing the following topics: how much to adjust calories on non-training days, what epiphanies the coaches have had recently, tips on losing fat without tracking calories and macros, what personal tips the guys have for battling hunger while dieting, advice for beginners in a building phase, if it's possible for a person to build a pro caliber physique only training 3 days a week, and a whole lot more. As always, if you have any feedback or comments on this particular episode, head over to 3dmusclejourney.com or our YouTube channel at youtube.com/team3dmj and leave it under podcast number 192. So let's get into it. Here is our surprise bonus Q&A episode featuring Brad Loomis and Jeff Alberts.
Hey 3DMJers, welcome to the Godfather's home and our conversation over your questions. Thank you very much for submitting them. Jeff was nice enough to compile them, and you'll notice that the writing is nice and big so that I can actually see it.
That's because you're old, Brad.
Hey, you're one to talk, brother.
We're both the same age.
Exactly.
I'm actually older.
You're 3 months older. So anyway, thanks for writing in the questions, you guys. First question: how much to adjust calories on non-training days, particularly when workouts are at 5 a.m.? So I'll go ahead and start with this one, and we need a lot of context with this. So I'm going to talk about somebody that's in a fat loss phase and they want to possibly adjust their calories to maintain the deficit during a fat loss phase. And so with the way that I program athletes' nutrition when they're in a fat loss phase, I give them I start with a weekly total of calories that I want them to take in. And then I really don't care when they get their high days and when they get their low days in, as long as the weekly quota is met. So I will give them sometimes one low day, sometimes 5 low days, sometimes one high day. And I leave it to them to know when they want to get their highs and their low days in. So if they want to get their high day in on a training day and they want to get their low days in on non-training days, they can do that. However, with that being said, you have to really weigh how you perform and how you can benefit from either higher or lower training days. Because I know for you, Jeff, for a long time, you would have your higher calories on non-training days in order to prepare for the training days on the next day, correct?
I prefer to set that up just because if you're dropping calories down, let's say on non-training day, and assuming, let's say this is a day after a training day where in a sense you want recovery. So it's going to make, let's say, recovery a little bit harder to come by when you're fatigued from a training session, and now you're kind of limiting the amount of calories you're taking in. That can be, I guess, debatable. But I just think, from a common sense standpoint, I'd rather have, just about the same amount of calories as I normally would, or a little bit more. That way I can recover. And then if there is a training day the next day, then you're already well fueled. The food's in your system, it's digested, you're ready to go. So I tend to prefer that method. I mean, of course, there's going to be some nuances depending on the phase we're in as far as a fat loss phase. If we're getting closer to shows, we're a little behind or something like that. But I always think, in general, whenever we're talking about dieting down, or even when we're not dieting down, like those rest days, I want to be well fueled, because primary driver for muscle is going to be your training. So therefore, I want it to be as fueled as possible. I can kind of understand like flexing, like giving someone a weekly target to hit and then give them that flexibility to kind of, make it mesh better with their life circumstances. But I think if we're like perfect robots, like I'd rather have my robot like well fueled for training.
Yeah, and when it comes to the 5 a.m. deal, again, fueling like Jeff was saying,
Coffee,
water, being hydrated, because like he was saying, if he wants to go into a training session well fueled, you could arguably have, like with me, I've fasted at a 5 a.m. workout, but that being said, usually the night before, I had a really good dinner with a fair amount of carbohydrates. I had all night to digest. And then that 5 a.m. workout, which, like I just said, is fasted, really only needs water, ultimately, to make sure we're hydrated. This is coming from a person that does not train fasted well. Like if I was to train at, say, noon or 1 o'clock that afternoon, having been fasted, I wouldn't perform well at all. In fact, I really hate training fasted. But at 5 a.m., if I had a good dinner the night before, it wouldn't even have to be like a huge dinner.
Yeah.
It could just be a regular dinner. And at 5 a.m., after some water, I'm good to go.
Yeah, but even if you're limiting your calories the day before your 5 a.m. session, like if you're okay, it's a non-training day, you're going to reduce calories down that day because you're trying to like create some type of deficit. Well, when you get up at 5 in the morning, like I'm assuming this person like is not getting up at 3 or 4 to have a meal to train before training. So it doesn't make sense to me to like under eat and then get up at 5 in the morning and expect to have a lot of fuel there to train on. So maybe you can backload that food. Like, okay, yeah, push more calories towards the evening time, but then you're hungry throughout the entire day. So to me, just from a practical standpoint, it kind of makes sense just to kind of even things out. It's easy to track too, like as far as assessing the data, because you're not having all these ups and downs, like low eating, high eating, low eating, high eating. So the scale weight and all that might be a little bit more consistent, so easier to interpret, easier to make adjustments based off of that.
Easier to make decisions, exactly.
So I think just in general with anything, like when you have a lot of things that are kind of waving like that, it's really good. It's hard to kind of figure out exactly, what's doing what.
Yeah. Now, what we can say, and you brought this up earlier, kind of off camera, was that this person is probably thinking, okay, I don't want to gain a lot of weight, and I'm not moving as much, and so therefore activity is low, turnover of calories is low. Maybe I should drop my calories because I don't need as many on a non-training day. And I mean, that there is a certain amount of validity to that. But at the same time,
I think it's nuanced too, because in theory, you're like, okay, if it's a training day, I want more calories there, right? And it's a non-training day, I don't need as many calories there because I'm not in the gym moving. But there's layers to that, because it depends on the training day, when you're training, how much food you're getting before training. So if you're training at 5 in the morning and that particular day you're supposed to eat more, well, that food's going to come after training, not before. So I can kind of make a case like, okay, if you're training in the evening, that would make sense. Okay, because now you have plenty of time to get all that extra food in on a training day, and you have plenty of time to digest it. It'll assimilate, and then therefore you can use it. But to me, again, it's like, if you just level things out, it's going to be a lot easier to interpret things.
Yeah, and it all comes out in the wash is kind of the bottom line. If you bring your calories down on a non-training day, in order to your body doesn't just shut off at night. And so you're going to need those calories the next day, especially if you're training. And if you had lower calories on the non-training day, you might not go into that workout fueled. And so, yeah, the bottom line is if you're in a deficit, arrange your lower calories and your higher calories such that you meet kind of the weekly quota, and program it maybe by high days and low days, and then pay attention to how you perform. And then, you can kind of adjust your calories and adjust your program based on getting the best performance from your calorie quota.
Another thing too is like everything we just said, it's all a moot point if you can't adhere to something.
Very true.
So
Very true.
The bottom line is like, if whatever you can adhere to best might reign supreme over all these little nuances we just said. So that's something that can take into consideration as well. But I know for me, if I'm training at 5 in the morning, which I don't, there's no way I'm getting up that early to train. But if I had to, I would probably lean more towards, let me make sure that, before I'm in bed, I have a decent amount of food there. So that way, it's there in the morning. And I'm getting in, like you said, just getting hydrated. and making sure maybe I'm having a cup of coffee, just get some type of little stimulant there.
Yeah.
If you have the little extra time, maybe you get in like 20, 25 grams of carbs, just something. But other than that, yeah, I mean, you're not going to have time to get up early and get a full-size meal in there and have it digest.
Unless you get up at 3 a.m.
Yeah. And then you're going to be seriously fatigued from getting up so damn early.
Yeah. So. Yeah. So hopefully we covered that one. I feel like we covered like every bit of context that we could have.
I think we did. If we missed anything, my apologies. We are 50 years old, but but we do have quite a bit of experience and wisdom. So my turn.
Yes.
Why are you grabbing that? It's my turn to read a question.
Because I want to get prepared. I'm 50 years old. I got to get my thoughts straight.
Okay. So Brad, what's been your epiphany when it comes to this bodybuilding lifestyle thing?
Yeah, that's a good question, because I've recently just had an epiphany, even after 25 years or so of doing this. And really, I have you to thank for it, because having watched your training for many, many, many years, as many of our listeners know, Jeff is very, very composed and very meticulous in how he's done his lifting. He's very proud of that. He's developed that over years. But all of a sudden, just out of the blue, as I'm watching his lifting. Look at that form. As I'm watching his lifting, and I've known this for a long time, each of his repetitions look exactly the same until basically they slow down. And even then, they still look the same. They're just a little bit slower. He's getting higher in RPE. He's getting closer to failure. And so I came to this epiphany of, basically if I'm on my repetitions, I need to do every repetition as if it's like a little mini plyometric. I need to move my load from point A to point B as fast as I can with as much force as I can, control it under the eccentric. Just like you're going to jump on a plyo box. You're going to try to jump as high and as fast as you can onto the box, and then you're going to step down. And you just rinse and repeat over and over and over again. And eventually, if you're putting maximum effort into every repetition, of course, the first few repetitions are going to move pretty fast. You're putting maximum effort into them. But you keep repeating that over and over and over again, almost immediately how close you are to failure, because all of a sudden the rep it basically just kind of feels a little bit slow. And then it gets a little bit slower. And then it gets really slow. And usually by that time, if you're going to get the next one or not. And so that's been my epiphany, is treat every repetition like a little mini plyometric with maximum force on the concentric. Move it as fast as I can until I can't. And every eccentric, I control it, basically getting that lengthening of the muscle under tension. And then I pause and I start again. And ever since I've had that epiphany, I can really honestly say that the quality of all of my repetitions has gone way up, and I'm actually preaching that to a lot of my clients and athletes now.
What's interesting is it was about a week ago I had a Zoom session, first time person, and they asked me, "Why do you slow your reps down?" And I'm like, "What do you mean? Had the same comment. Why do you train so slow?" Mm-hmm. And I'm like, I thought about it. I'm like, do you think I'm purposely slowing my rep speed down? And they're like, yeah, you look like you're, I'm like, I'm not purposely going slow. The concentric is going as fast as I possibly can move it under total control. Because, obviously, if we're purposely slowing down the concentric, you're not going to recruit as much muscle fiber.
Exactly, yeah.
It's like throwing a football, right? Like if I tell you, Brad, I want you to throw this football as slow as you can.
Yeah.
Like you're going to go, and the ball's going to go, blip. So think of how much muscle you're actually using to move that object. Yeah. Not very much. So I always I'm going as fast as I can under total control. And if it looks like I'm moving it slow, well, guess what? It's heavy as shit.
Yes.
Excuse my French.
Yes.
It's super heavy.
Yes.
So my concentrics are as fast as I possibly can move it to recruit as much fiber as possible under total control so I don't blow a gasket. And the eccentrics, I don't go excessively slow because I don't want to generate so much fatigue that I can't do any more concentrics. Like I'm shortening the amount of total reps I can do.
But you control
purposely
it.
control it. Like I'm slowing it down purposely. So I'm eliminating a lot of that excessive momentum or whiplash that you get from that. So that way, when I go back into a concentric, it's
the
not
muscle.
sloppy. Yeah,
Yes, it's the muscle.
The
moving
leverages aren't shifting. I'm not using body English.
Yeah.
And that's how I can get more out of my training with less. Because people perceive like, oh, you don't do a lot of set volume, which I don't. It's because every single rep, I'm like getting every ounce out of me.
Yeah.
And even on that last rep or two, like it's just really, really slow. Like you'd be surprised, like even if you were to, like actually like on the eccentrics on the last 1 or 2 reps of the set, actually slow them down even slower. Because mentally, like that anxiety builds up, like, oh shit, this is hard. And a lot of people's instinct is to like try to thrust and go faster. And that's where you lose the control. I go slow. Like I'm actually going really slow, controlling it. And then like when I go to push something up or pull, like it's just all there. Like I'm recruiting everything. I'm not asking like leverage or trying to jerk it up. So those last 2 reps, it's like they're probably far more effective than like reps 1 or 2.
Yeah. And it's funny too, because if we would have had this conversation like even a year or 2 ago, I would have nodded my head and I would have said, oh yeah, okay. But I would not have understood it. It's not until I actually started doing it that I both understood it and knew it. And right now, I purposely stop at the end of my concentric or my eccentric right now because I don't feel like I've mastered where you are yet, to where you don't really have to stop it. You can just get the full eccentric and then you can actually use the muscle to move the weight again and not use momentum, or other muscles to help move. I haven't mastered that yet. I have to stop so that I can kind of use that muscle in order to get it going again and not use momentum and things like that.
I've actually had like one set. I remember the set, like it was last Saturday. I was doing a pull down. I was halfway through and I was like my last rep and I was like right there. And I like, it just stopped.
It stopped. Yeah.
But then I composed myself and I went, and I was able to complete the entire rep.
Wow.
Totally controlled.
Yeah. See,
and then
I wouldn't be able to do that.
Then I was done. I was like, okay, that to me is like, okay, that's it. That's failure.
So that brings up an interesting
And that was the last
point.
set. Just so people are like, well, was that your first set? Second, that was the last set. So I don't want to blow my wad on the first set, and then sets 2 and 3 is garbage.
Yeah. And that was kind of my question, because you kind of being kind of the master of when to know when to call it. It's like, okay, I got more out of that one rep there than I would have at any other rep. Say that was, say, your second set, and that took arguably a lot out of you. Would you have called it right then and not done your third set?
Probably like when I got stuck there, I probably would have just not fight it all the way down, let it up, and then let me get that other set in. Okay. So I don't waste so much energy with that last fight. It's like pulling in a big ass fish. Like you're gonna sit there and fight it for 4 hours.
So if I understand you correctly, if you were to do it again, you would have just, and you had another set to do, you would have just called it right then, and then you could get another set.
So I can get more reps on the next set.
More quality reps.
If I would have just went all the way through, chances, let's say I was aiming, I can't remember exact reps I was aiming for. It was an 8 to 10 rep range. Let's say I got 9 here, stuck, then I let it down, then chances are I'm going to match 9 or, hit 8, 10, somewhere in there. But if I was to grind it all the way in, maybe it's going to look like 7 reps.
Okay. So because it was the last rep of the last set, you're just like, I'm going for it.
That's it. Yeah, I'm going for it.
It's
like,
my
this
last,
is my last set
rep anyway.
I'm moving on to the next exercise after this. So, hey, I'm going to fight it all the way in.
Yeah. But if you had another set, you would have just called it.
I would just call it.
Yeah. Okay. Huh. Interesting.
To be strategic.
Yeah. So how about you, Jeff? What epiphanies have you had?
I don't have any epiphanies.
Even after all your years, no epiphanies, huh?
No, I can't think any.
Any coaching epiphanies?
No, I think you should read the next question. Yeah,
okay. You got off easy on that one, my friend.
I did. No, yours. So what you're saying with yours is that what you've learned and realized is that the quality of your training matters. Like to be more efficient, so you don't have to waste your time like doing excessive work, less meaningful work.
Exactly. Yeah. I've learned that a high quality, high effort repetition is more effective not only in the short term of a workout than doing, arguably junk repetitions, either using too much momentum or you're kind of using that rebound effect, that stretch reflex and just keeping your reps kind of moving the whole time. I found the quality of the workouts to be more effective in the short run. And obviously, I mean, yes, you're genetically blessed, but at the same time, you're doing something right repeatedly over and over and over again to look the way you are. And so I kind of feel like that is the best way in the long term, hypertrophy wise, mass wise, muscle wise, to get the most out of your time. So I've kind of come to those two conclusions, both in the short term and then the evidence on you in the long term. So
I do have an epiphany now.
Yay!
My genetics aren't as good as people think they are. So if you go back to before I started training, I was lanky. Like I had these long string arms. Clavicles are kind of on the narrow side. Mm-hmm. I think I'm blessed in a sense, like I have like small waist, that type of thing. Mm-hmm. But I wouldn't necessarily say I'm, let's say, an eczema type, where I'm just like, okay, yeah, I'm just like a big dude.
I just look this way, no matter what.
Big dude. Not to say that eczema doesn't work hard, because obviously it does.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't classify myself as someone with like superior genetics. I think I'm kind of just like above average. But to go from a skinny 14-year-old to a pretty jacked 17-year-old, it wasn't like the wind blew and I'm like, okay, now I'm jacked at 17.
Yeah.
Like if you go back to some of my pictures, like I had that one curling picture, you can see I'm like a mid-rep in the picture with like, I don't know, it was like 105 pounds or whatever. My back is perfectly vertical. My elbows are tucked. Like everything, even at 17, like my form was just rock solid. And you can see the effort level all over my face. The only issue was I didn't know how to control my effort back then. The poise, like in my face, like the grunting and all that. But I mean, if you look at the actual exercise form, it was there, and I was progressive in my training. And we're going to get to a question that's going to talk about like for beginners. But that's kind of not so much an epiphany, but I think sometimes we talk about genetics. It's like you still have to put the work in. You still have to do things correctly. Yeah, you can get away with a lot when you have great genetics if you have some miscues, but think of if you have everything just like on point, that's when you get like the elite.
Yeah. And that brings up an excellent point, because I recently wrote a blog on this. Well, not recently, it's probably a couple months. And I talk about the difference between a good lifter and somebody that lifts good. And I made that analogy because, I mean, really, when you first started doing that, how did you learn that? Is that something that
was instincts?
Exactly.
Because I think just from the athletic background I had.
That's the name of that blog, is Instinctual Lifting. That's the name of that blog. But see, that's something that nobody really had to teach you that. That was just...
No, and then over the years, I just kind of picked up some nuances. Yeah. Like, okay, if I'm doing like a cable curl, for example, like you see a lot of people with their feet close together and they're too close to the cable machine. And so they're like, all over the place. Yeah. It's like, create a stable base, right? Yeah. It starts with your feet. Spread your feet out. Bend your knees. Flinch your glutes. That way your hips are nice and locked in. Keep a tight core. So when you are pulling, with your arms, that everything is stable. Yeah. When you're doing it. So that helps improve form and technique.
See, and that's you've had all those years to refine that technique. And it's kind of like, I'm now starting.
But I never had a podcast that said, "Hey, flinch your butt on a curl, so you can have good form and good stability." So I had to kind of learn the hard way. But I would say, instinctually, like I've always been pretty good about having good technique.
Yeah. All right. So now it's my turn to read a question. All right. Tips on losing fat without tracking calories and macros. So. Then this is something that we've talked about a lot here recently with intuitive eating and kind of our prep positioning course that Berto recently just spearheaded recently, and kind of that pre-prep before the prep, and if you really have to track macros. And again, a lot of context here needs to be put in place.
Steve's course for this one.
Yeah. But that being said, this question says tips on losing fat without tracking calories and macros. And with that particular nuance to that question, really, I have to kind of say, you have to track something. You have to track your body weight. if not tracking calories and macros, first of all, you have to have a good amount of experience, and you're going to have to rate your fullness levels. You're going to have to track something. And more importantly, you're going to have a baseline. So if you're not losing fat, AKA losing weight, you have to kind of say, okay, at this body weight, I can maintain this eating 3 meals a day, each of those meals being a fullness level of, say, 8 on a scale of 1 to 10. 8 being maybe you have a slight food baby, but you're not miserable. And you can maintain your weight at that level of fullness, 3 meals a day and more. Here's another part, another layer. Is that clean food? Is that dirty food? Is that high calorie food? Is that low calorie food? Because that also has to kind of play a little bit of an effect into it as well. So you got to track something is the bottom line. So can you do it without tracking calories or macros? I mean, again, losing fat, you're going to need to drop weight in order to drop fat, which means you're going to have to take those 3 meals of whatever food it is that you're eating, clean versus dirty, or the first 2 clean and the third one dirty. And you're going to have to either A, bring those fullness levels down to, say, a level of 5 where you're not really hungry, but you're not really full and you don't have a food baby. Or you're going to have to reduce a meal and go down to 2 meals a day. Or if it's like 2 clean meals and 1 dirty meal, you're going to have to eliminate the dirty meal and make it clean. So but you're going to have to track something.
Yeah, there's going to have to be some type of system in place.
A tracking system of some sort. Yeah.
I can take you back to my early days when I was prepping, when I didn't track calories and I didn't go by macros. It was more like, okay, I had 5 meals per day, or 6 meals back then. And it was always like, first meal would be, let's say, oatmeal with protein powder. Then it would be chicken, brown rice, broccoli. Like that was bro. So it was like 1 chicken breast each meal. And whenever I kind of like monitor my body weight, okay, I'm not losing body weight or body fat. How do I make an adjustment? Mm-hmm. Okay, instead of having a cup of brown rice, I had 3/4 cup brown rice, or a half a cup, or I'm gonna have 3/4 chicken breast instead of 1.
Yeah,
like that's how I'd make an adjustment. But I had a system. So you have to track something.
Exactly.
So my system was 5 or 6 meals. They all looked relatively the same. Could you imagine like if I was eating different foods constantly with each of those meals every single day? Like how would you be able to keep track of that? Mm-hmm. So there has to be some way to gauge progress, right? You have to weigh yourself or whatever.
Or just adjustments.
Or take measurements or something. Yeah. You have to keep some type of... You have to have a system in place, and you have to have a way to make adjustments. I mean, you have to have a way to assess the progress in order to make those adjustments.
Yeah. Because the bottom line is you have to reduce your calories, and you have to have a baseline of where you're at, either gaining weight or maintaining weight. And then I did the same thing as you did, Jeff. I was really bro. I would eat 8 meals a day. And so, if I would sometimes be a little bit proactive, and I would just, regardless of if I was losing weight or not, instead of having a full envelope of a meal replacement pack, I would have half, or like you, instead of having 3/4 of a cup of oatmeal, I would have 1/4 of a cup of oatmeal. And so that's a very, I guess, objective way of making incremental changes. And that's one way that you can go about it.
I mean, if someone's, let's say, green, relatively new to the bodybuilding lifestyle, and they're trying to lose some body fat, like chances are they don't really have a good handle on their nutrition as far as how to eat, that type of thing. Mm-hmm. I mean, you might be able to say, hey, like, stop drinking sodas. If they're drinking sodas, like, they're probably going to see a calorie reduction. They're probably going to lose weight. Mm-hmm. But then eventually it's going to stop. Then it's like, okay, where do you go from there?
What do you adjust from there? Yeah.
Yeah. So it might be like, okay, hey, instead of eating that last meal you always do at 9:00 at night, like maybe just eat half of that, or just eliminate that one altogether. You might create a deficit that way. But again, it's not really too rigid. So at some point, it's probably going to slow down. Mm-hmm. And then you're going to have to figure out another way to kind of make that progress. And then you're probably going to have to track something else a little bit more closely.
Yeah. And the only other thing with this particular question about losing fat that is really important is if you're losing weight, muscle's going to be kind of the catalyst there. And as bodybuilders, we always want to maintain our muscle. So I kind of feel like in some way, you have to kind of keep mindful of your protein. You have to. And I mean, I'm kind of speaking from experience here because I've gone through a phase of eating habitually low protein. And if left to my own devices, I'm just going to get 120 grams of protein. And if I'm losing weight, even in the presence of weight training, I think it's arguable. Am I going to be optimizing my environment for maintaining muscle if I'm eating 120 grams of protein a day? I kind of tend to think no.
It's not something I would favor for you to
And
do.
you would not prescribe that for me as a coach.
And I would definitely, if you're like, hey Jeff, this is it. I'm gonna do 120 every single day. I know it's low. Then I would be like, okay, I'm really gonna make sure the rate of loss is on the conservative side, way on the conservative side. Because if you're losing too quickly, you don't have enough protein in there, chances of you retaining that muscle mass probably isn't going to be as great as it could be if you had your protein where it needs to be.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, it is it possible? Yes. But you're going to have some experience. You're going to have a lot of, just baselines that you can go from, and a system. Like you said, you're going to have some sort of a system of tracking something, if not calories and macros, even if it's just body weight. Because another thing you got to worry about is, okay, I'm just going to be hungry all the time. Okay, well, great. That you're going to lose weight. But again, losing fat, you got to worry about under eating. You got to worry about undernourishing yourself in protein. And then again,
from a bodybuilding, because we're obviously bodybuilding coaches. The question was asked on a bodybuilding platform, so I'm assuming this person's like wants to maintain muscle mass, wants to lose the body fat, wants the ideal end product. So I think sometimes it's like I don't want to track calories or macros. Like I don't want to be bothered with that. So how can I hack it to where it's like sometimes if you're trying to reach a certain goal. Like sometimes you just have to embrace the fact like you just got to sacrifice and go there. Yeah. And make it happen.
Yeah. Because almost everybody, if they want to get like elite level, essential levels of body fat, at some point you're just going to have to embrace it. And you're going to have to track your calories. You're going to have to track your macros. And, when you guys take over my nutrition, you're going to give me macros.
So get this.
And I'm going to hit them.
This year, at the beginning of December, that's the end of my 35 years of training, headed into year number 36. And I told myself with this next prep, I'm going to do this intuitively. Remember?
I do.
I'm not going to track anything. Well, now that I brought Berto in, I'm like, yeah, we're going to be tracking food. So even like you're 35, like I'm confident that I can probably reach my goal by not tracking. But again, I would have a system in place because I always eat my 4 meals per day. So it would just monitor the scale, monitor my visuals, see if I'm actually visually losing weight. But I would have to have a way to manipulate my food. Yeah. And I would have to have some type of accountability there. Yeah. So there's no way, in a sense, like if you're a bodybuilder, like, and your goal is to like really just be elite with your physique, to make it a higher standard, you're going to have to track something.
Yeah. Yeah.
What's going on, 3DMJers? Eric Helms here. Thanks for listening to our podcast. I just want to take a second to tell you about MASS, Monthly Applications in Strength Sport. This is a monthly research review that I put out with Greg Nuckols, Dr. Mike Zerdos, and Dr. Eric Trexler. We cover the most up-to-date, peer-reviewed research in the world of strength and physique sport that's directly relevant to your practice as a coach or an athlete. We provide our reviews in written format, but also, since you enjoy our podcast, in audio roundtable reviews where we discuss the research in depth. Finally, we also do video concept reviews where we cover a broader topic in video format for your learning. For fitness professionals, you can take quizzes on MASS content and earn continuing education credits for most of the biggest certifying bodies in the fitness industry. If you want to sign up and get a subscription, head over to 3dmusclejourney.com and click on the products tab. Thanks for your time and thanks for listening.
My turn to read.
It is.
We go glasses now. Okay. All right, Brad, here we go. So what are some personal tips you have for battling hunger while dieting?
Well, first of all, you've got your 5 hunger hacks that we just recently put out.
That's right. I did write a blog on my 5 hunger hack tips.
Yes. So I don't, personally myself, I don't think we need to address that right now because we can just refer people to those hacks.
Refer them to the link, but you got to keep the goal, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So that's one. And I think we just to maybe do number 1 or number 2. You have to embrace the fact that you're going to be hungry. Like if you're wanting to lose weight, you're going to be hungry because you're basically slowly starving yourself. And I think it's a lot of times people, they try to make it to where they don't have hunger at all. And that's not realistic. At some point, you're going to feel it.
Mm-hmm.
And the way I see it is if I'm a little, like, I don't want to be excessively hungry the whole time, but if I'm somewhat hungry, I kind of just reframe it like, good, Okay, if my body's not getting enough food to cure that hunger, then where's it going to get the energy? Body fat.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's what I want.
Yeah. In fact, I've heard you say that before. You're like, I'm hungry. It's working.
That's it. It's working. But I mean, I don't want to be so hungry to where it's like, oh shit, I just binged. Like, I don't want to get to that point. But I mean, again, if it just takes up less energy to embrace it versus trying to fight it. Like, we're prep coaches, right? Like, we've seen some athletes spend 2, 3, 4 hours in the kitchen preparing a 300 calorie meal.
Yeah.
You're like, you just spent that much time for 300 calories and it took you literally not even 5 minutes to eat the food. It's like, just have a protein shake and a Fuji apple and that's like 30 seconds of prep time. And now you're not hungry anymore. You're not food focused anymore.
Yeah. And on top of that, they spent 5-6 hours researching it on the internet on buying the lowest calorie, noodles of something that has like 0 calories in it. They spent all that time and that energy just simply because they couldn't deal with a little bit of hunger, You're going to be hungry at some point, and sometimes you're going to be very hungry. But on the flip side of that, don't be stupid. I mean, you're going to be hungry, but I mean, you don't have to have cereal, You can have an apple for your carbs. You can have something more sustaining.
Yeah. I mean, do you go and grab like a Pop-Tart, or do you say, you know what, maybe oatmeal might contain me a little bit better, or whey protein, or a chicken breast? Well, chicken breast might digest a little slower. So you have to be wise with your food choices. So yes, I mean, it does take a little bit of thought process to have, to kind of help with hunger.
Yeah.
But not so excessive where you're like making up this cauliflower rice mash mixture with all this other stuff. And you spent like 4 hours, looking through the spice rack to figure out what you're going to put on it. It's like you're wasting so much mental energy doing that.
Yeah. So I've between that and the hunger hacks, that one we've crushed.
Okay. We'll leave it in there. Your turn.
All right.
Glasses off.
Advice for a beginner in a building phase. So again, beginner is kind of the key word to this question, because a beginner in the building phase, it boils down to 2 things: lift weights and eat. And really, it doesn't need to get much more complex than that. But as we know, we're 3D Muscle Journey. We're going to give you the nuance. We're going to give you the ways to optimize. So training and eating, Jeff, expand that.
Let me ask you this. So do you think the beginner should be focused on worrying about getting bigger? Like, obviously that's a goal, right? That's everybody's goal. That's my goal. I've been doing this for 35 years. I still want to get bigger. But think of the experience level. Like, you just walked into the gym. You're like, I want to get jacked. And how many guys have you seen go in there and they're lifting heavy things? And you're like, ooh, that's nasty. That's ugly. They're going to hurt themselves.
Yeah.
So the priority should be exercise form, like kind of you touched on earlier. Like, don't worry about like lifting heavy things just yet. Like, let's just make sure you're moving from point A to point B. The fundamentals, get those down correctly and solid. Once those are down, now we can worry about like trying to progress loads while maintaining like the good form.
Yeah. And I mean, we know this through anecdotal evidence and actual evidence-based practices. A beginner is not, their body is scrambling to figure out with what's going on with the lightest of loads. And you've got to get good at the movement, because that neurologic adaptation phase can take weeks sometimes before you even start building muscle anyway. So you don't have to crush it in the gym lifting all these heavy loads. You just got to lift weights.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be super, super heavy. You got to get the form down. You can just basically get good at the movements and then start worrying about adding some load. And when you add load, you don't have to add much.
Yeah, you're going to have better long-term progress if you're learning that form first. Because let's say if you don't, Like, because oftentimes, they don't really want to prioritize that because they're in such a hurry, right?
They're seeing everybody else lifting all these plates.
Yeah. So, hey, I'm gonna lift as heavy as I can. You're only gonna go so far with substandard form. Eventually, it's like, okay, it's just so bad where now that barbell curl, you're like leaning way back.
Doing a semi-clean.
You're only gonna go so far with that. But if you clean things up from the beginning, that's really rock solid, then you're going to have a lot more sustained progress. So the heavier things you're lifting down the road, like you said earlier, the quality of those repetitions are going to be so on
much
point.
better. Yeah.
You're going to be far more efficient. You're going to be putting on that muscle probably a bit faster than you would otherwise. So that's for me, that's like heavy emphasis for beginners. Like make sure your form is rock solid. And then from there, it's like, okay, now let's stress over like how do we progress from there as far as loads, reps, that type of thing.
Yeah. Because I mean, we don't have to progress that fast when you're that beginner. You just need to lift weights.
Most beginners make good gains anyway, regardless.
Exactly. And we know this. We know this through all kinds of different types of evidence. It's kind of like the analogy I always use. If the water is boiling at level 8 on the stove, what good is it to turn it to level 10?
You're just going to make me spend more money on my electricity
Exactly.
bill.
We're wasting energy and we're not doing anything to the water is the bottom line.
That's it.
And so, we know this. And I'm the same way. The harder you work, the faster the gains. Well, not in the beginner phase. In the beginner phase, just do it. Yeah. Just find something that you really enjoy, first of all, and that you really like doing and that you will keep doing all the time. And just let it happen the way that kind of it's meant to happen. Just like you're going to learn how to play basketball. You're not going to slam the ball the first day. You got to learn to dribble. You got to do all those other skill things, And that's the training aspect that I wish people would kind of focus on more, is that get the foundation first.
That, and I think too, just to emphasize that it's not going to take a lot to see gains in the early stages. So they don't have to be in the gym 5-6 days a week. Like they can probably start off with 3-4 days, and there's going to be a nice balance there because they're going to get that stimulus when they're training, but then they're going to have those recovery days in there. So I think that's super important. And then if they're well fed, I mean, that's another topic, right? We got to make sure they're eating.
Yeah.
So, but I mean, if they're balancing out, like I always talk about supply and demand, right? Like if you're just starting out and you're really new, you don't know how to train, your form isn't going to be rock solid. But if you're doing 5-6 training days and, hey, you're looking at some of the research, you're new to it. You're like, oh, they're telling me I need to do 20 sets for every body part. Well, now you're talking 20 crappy sets for most people just starting out in the gym.
Starting from 0 sets.
So now it's like it's not great quality work. The fatigue might be really escalated because they're in the gym like 6 days a week. So it's like just maybe every other day. So you ensure you get the recovery and then you focus on quality. You have a better balance. And I think this can apply to just even advanced lifters as well. It's like you want to make sure you're balancing out that supply and demand.
Yeah.
But the food aspect, it's like, you need to make sure you're eating. And of course we would need to figure out like the individuals, like, where their body type is as far as where their body fat level is. But in general, it's like, make sure we're kind of starting out in circles.
Correct. Yeah. And that's really the important thing is there's two different distinctions there. A lot of people get into weightlifting and kind of building phases, I'm going to say, because they're skinny, they don't have a lot of muscle, or maybe they're like my son, for example, got into lifting because he wanted to be better in football, and so with those people, you've got to eat because your body is basically building new cells or growing cells. It's building muscle is what it's doing.
It takes a lot of energy to put some new tissue on your body.
Exactly. And it's just like if I punched a hole in your wall over there, I'm going to need material to fix that.
Yeah.
If I don't have material, that hole's going to stay there.
It's going to stay there.
And when we're tearing those mitochondria and we're lifting weights, we're basically breaking the muscle down. And if you don't have the material there, you're not going to be able to build on top of it. And so you have to eat. I mean, arguably, maybe make sure you're eating a high protein diet, But
that's the thing with beginners. Like, should I bulk? Should I cut? What do I do? Like probably 90% of the time we're going to have beginners like eating, gain some weight. So in a sense, not I hate the word bulk because in a sense it's kind of like
it's a
like
negative
getting,
connotation.
Yeah, you're like getting fat, but you definitely need to be in a surplus to kind of push your body weight up. That's going to fuel the training. It's going to help with recovery. It's nice to eat, right? So, so at least you're putting this specific beginner in a good environment to make those gains. And even if, let's say, you do get a little fluffy, let's say you're like, oh man, okay, there goes my abs. But I mean, if your lift went, let's say now you started out with benching 100 pounds and your form improved, and now 6 months later you're doing 200 pounds with really good form.
Yeah.
And you're well fueled. I mean, think of what your physique's going to do from a muscle standpoint. So I can live with a little bit of fluff. I can always deal with the fat loss later. Like when you're
dealing
down
with the fat loss is easy.
But you want to set up your base,
Exactly.
Good 2-3 years of just like, hey, let me just lift and eat.
Yeah, because you're only going to have one beginner phase. It's not like you're going to have another beginner phase at some point.
You mean I don't have any more beginner phases?
You're out of your beginner phases, Jeff.
Damn.
You might be able to take 2 years off from training and get maybe a beginner phase for a week.
I was hoping I had a beginner phase so I can eat some more pizza, but I mean, damn. All right.
But yeah, you're only going to get one beginner phase. And just anecdotally, my son, who when he was younger dealt with being a little bit overweight, being a little bit chubby, and it was I think it was his junior year. He was weightlifting and he wanted to cut. His dad's a bodybuilder. He wanted to lose some weight, and have the physique, And I'm like, son, you're a football player, You're still arguably a novice at most. I said, eat. I said, you go on a seafood diet, and if you see the food, you eat it. And his protein really arguably wasn't really all that high, but he made sure to have a couple protein shakes a day, and he had protein with each meal. They were kids that he was going to the gym on his football team that were training him, and they were talking behind his back going, Xander's on something. Xander's taking something. He's looking huge. And it was because he was lifting and
he was
eating.
lifting with progressively. And obviously good form, because obviously you're coaching them up with that. But yeah, I mean, there you go, a good environment.
And he was eating.
Yeah.
And yeah, that was basically the bottom line. So the answer to your question, beginner in a building phase, get the foundation down, lift, and eat.
I think another thing to kind of look at, and this is maybe a little bit outside of what we're talking about, is don't look to your left or look to your right. Or
good point.
Look what's going on, and like you're comparing yourself to other people.
It's a good point.
Because chances are when you're a beginner, you're not looking at your buddy who's just starting out too, going, oh, I want to look like Joe here. You're like, I want to look like Alberto Nunez.
Yes.
So you can't, the reality is you can't look at someone who's that far down the road. And that's really all it is he's just further down the road. That's it.
Yeah.
And a lot of the fundamentals that we're talking about right now for the beginner, it still applies to Alberto. Like he's still using the same fundamentals he used when he first started training.
Yeah.
So you try not to let, comparing yourself to other people kind of rob you of like what you're currently.
Yeah. What's that saying? You can't compare your day one to somebody's year 5 or something like that. Yeah.
We crushed it.
Yeah.
All right. On to the next.
Yeah, for your turn.
It's my turn. Glasses back on. Here we go. All right. This is a good one. A person who could only train 3 times a week. Do you think they could build a pro caliber physique? So they're assuming, because they're only, like, that's the thing, only training 3 days a week, that they can't necessarily build something that's on the special side. And I think oftentimes, like, we assume we need to be in the gym 5-6 days a week. Like, that's kind of the old myth, right? I can speak personally. Like, I've trained 3 days a week all through my 20s and all through my 30s. And I ended up turning pro in my late 30s. Probably would have got it a lot sooner if I would have hit the right shows. But I built a pretty good physique just training 3 days a week. And that was because of the effort level, the quality of training, always wanting to be progressive in the gym. And most of the time, well fueled, other than just preparing for shows. I was always well filled in my off seasons. And if you're progressing the loads, you're progressing the reps over time, the volume goes up over time. So I just think that there's an insecurity about volume. I think that's the big thing. Like, I think we always question, are we doing enough? I think that's where probably this question stems from. And I think, again, if you have good work ethic, you're progressive, you're eating enough, things we just talked about for the beginner still applies in this situation. And I'm assuming this person is asking because they obviously have a busy lifestyle, right? Like I can only get to the gym 3 days a week. That kind of tells me like if this person like tried to train more, then stress levels might even be amplified. And if that's the case, then you have to kind of question like what would their training quality be like if they're actually trying to do more. It might even be worse. Like they might not be getting good performance. Their recovery might be hampered. So maybe 3 days a week is optimal. Like that is the optimal amount of training for this person as far as the frequency, as far as days per week. And I mean, 3 days a week, we can do a lot of creative things, right? With training, like we could hit body parts once a week. We could hit body parts twice. We could even do full body splits where you're hitting body parts 3 times per week. So there's different ways we can still cover the principles out of the muscle and strength pyramids. What's your thoughts on it?
You know, it's I'm glad that you kind of put these in this order, because really some of the stuff we talked about earlier with the quality of repetitions and putting that effort into each repetition, you can do that easily in 3 days a week. You know, you could arguably do that in 2 days a week, you know? But yeah, like you were just saying, like if you say that you have a 4 day a week program and 3 of those days, low stress, you get good workouts, all the repetitions are real high quality. And then that 4th day, you're going in there stressed because you got to jam it in there real quick. And then maybe your reps are fast and you're trying to hurry up and go through the workout. You probably would have been better off just resting that day and recovering and just sticking to the 3 day a week program, you know? But yeah, you're right. The great thing about the muscle and strength training pyramids is it's kind of like the principles that are there. It's kind of like choose your own adventure. Build your own, you know, journey. You know, you just take those principles and you fit it into whatever schedule works the best for you. I mean, the recommendations like we talk about are in the pyramid books are 10 to 20 sets a week. Well, that's a recommendation, but beginners, do they even need 10 sets a week like we just talked about? They could probably get away with 6 or 8. Yeah. Do you ever train 20 sets a week?
I can't count that high.
I mean,
no.
There's another.
No, just because of the years of trial and error that I've gone through. So I've kept data for myself. So it's like, cool, I could look at 10 to 20. That's a broad general guideline to kind of follow.
Correct. Yeah.
But over the years, I've realized like 10 to like more towards 20 would be way too much for me. I won't be able to recover. Yeah. So my baseline's in the neighborhood of like 6 to 10 per week.
Can you fit that into 3 days a week?
Yeah, for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah, no doubt.
Absolutely.
So my thought is this, like anytime, if you're trying to fit in training to where like you're heading to the gym and you have resentment, you're just like, oh gosh.
Or dragging yourself.
Oh gosh, I got deadlifts, or oh gosh, I got squat. Like even if it's just an exercise, like if there's a resentment towards an exercise, like where do you think your effort level is going to be when you're there? I'm not going to be excited to do it. So, you know, instead of doing your 4 sets with, you know, 1 in the tank or whatever you're trying to do, you're like, okay, I'm only going to do 2 sets. Yeah. Or you do the 4 and it's like, yeah, you had like 5 in the tank there because you weren't really trying.
Exactly. Yeah.
So if 3 is like the max number of days you can train, but every time you step foot in the gym, like there's no resentment, there's nothing but excitement, you're well recovered. Like, what do you think you're going to do in the gym when you're there?
That's super productive.
You're going to crush it.
Yeah.
I don't know how many times we said crush it in this podcast, but it's way true. You're going to crush
it. Way too many. But yeah, I mean, I feel I've written many a program with 3 times. I've taken many a program that was 5 days a week and rearranged the volume and took the sets that we had spread across 5 days and put it into 3 days. And sometimes I even like shave a set, or, you know, if I've got somebody doing 15 sets of chest, if I'm going to put that into 3 days a week, I might just drop that down to 13. Is your body really going to miss 2 sets? Especially if, you know, those 13 sets are more higher quality than the 15 sets we were doing before.
And then maybe dropping 2 sets off, your fatigue goes down a little bit lower. So therefore you got more energy for the other sets you're doing and you get better performance. Yeah. So let's say you lose 2 sets, but then you pick up lower reps. Well, it's a wash. You just...
Well, there's that. That's all basically, what is that, unquantified or unnumerical volume that you've just actually picked up, even though you numerically drop 2 sets. Yeah. So I do that many times. So the answer to that question is, in a nutshell, yes.
I think you can. Of course, you got to take in consideration like genetics, people's symmetry. You also take the mental aspect, right? Like the hunger aspect, like what we talked about earlier, right? Like people are asking, like, how do I avoid hunger? Well, right there, you have to have the mentality. Like if you're trying to be a pro caliber physique, a lot of it's mental. So you have to have the mental capacity to kind of like diet hard and diet for long periods of time and things like that. So there's a lot more than just the training aspect.
Correct. Yeah.
But I mean, yeah, if all you got is 3 days a week, yeah. And factor this, 3 days a week for 1 year of training, you'll probably make progress. 5 years of training, you'll make progress. 10 years. And even if, let's say, it takes you a year or two longer to get to a certain goal because you're not training as much, if that's really the case, you're inevitably going to get there if you just keep going.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you have to have the perseverance, and this is a long game too.
Yeah. And you brought up an excellent point. I mean, sure, 3 days a week, we're saying yes, but if your nutrition's junk, and you're eating Pop-Tarts and your protein's low and your adherence is not great, you get 3 days a week, like maybe 30 weeks out of the year, but then the other 20, you're like missing some altogether. Yeah. Then there's probably the answer is no. So you brought up a great point there, Jeff. Yeah. Great point. So, all right. Glasses off, glasses on. How can we convince Brad to compete in bodybuilding? Oh, wow.
I take blame for this because someone's probably asking this because of I mentioned on my blog I said, hey guys, I need your help, to help support Brad, get him out of retirement, get him back on stage. And a lot of you guys were like, yeah, come on, Brad, let's do it. So here we go. So yeah, what is it going to take to get you back on the stage?
How much time do we have? Well, I mean, first of all, a little bit of backstory. In my later years, even like when I started powerlifting in like 2011, 2012, I had this shift. And the shift was in my early years, I trained to compete. And without the competition there, arguably my training wasn't going to happen, and I went through phases where I was coaching Pop Warner football and I was not competing, and I was hitting the gym twice a week. And all this other stuff that we were talking about, I was way down on all of our recommendations. But at about 2011, 2012, I found this newfound love for my training, and it was the exact opposite. I started actually training, loving training, and if I competed, yeah, okay, But I was training not to compete, I was training anyway, and I would just compete eventually at some point. And so through that, I mean, I had some decent years. Now, when you're competing as a pro, you're not getting much in the way of serving the competitive person in me, because the pro is at such high level. I'm not going to show up to a show and compete for the overall in a pros, So that was no longer there. And so the love naturally was for training and for prepping. And I arguably prepped in 2015, and I wasn't even doing a show. We were doing a guest posing, and I was competing at USAPL Raw Nationals, and I wanted to make the 74 kg JW class. And so I got this love for embracing the hard part, embracing the hunger, and embracing training when it was hard. And it was hard to get to the gym when you're not well fed and you're not, you're dieting and you're losing weight and figuring out these strategies and mentally of how to overcome these things.
The process.
Exactly. And so over these last, I'm probably 8, maybe 10 months, I've kind of missed that. And so I've started to dabble a little bit in prepping. And we kind of alluded here a little bit earlier in the podcast that, at some point, you guys are going to basically be my coaches. You're going to take over. You're going to assign me macros, and Eric's going to assign me sets and things like that we know that all good coaches do, and give me a little bit more accountability. But I've kind of already started my journey. I've been tracking now for arguably about, I don't know, probably 18 weeks or something like that. And I've dropped about 5 or 6, and it's been fun. I've enjoyed it. I've enjoyed tracking my macros again, and I'm not hitting macros, but I'm just punching my food in that I'm eating, and I'm seeing the scale go down. Correct.
Okay.
Well, I mean, my protein, I at least made an effort to hit a higher protein target.
That's it. We're building muscle now. Newbie stage again. All right, we like it.
So what is it going to take me to compete in bodybuilding? I mean, I don't know because obviously that's the end goal here is to get shredded.
Do you see yourself getting on stage again? It's like, is that something that entices you?
Really? No.
Does getting shredded entice you?
Actually, getting shredded is almost diverts me really because I know how hard that is. And at this point now, I don't know that I'm ready to do that. Now, that being said, that's this point now. And momentum builds.
Yep.
And we were talking about this earlier. You know, I've dropped 6 pounds. It's been a good 6 pounds. I can see it on my physique. I can feel it in my clothes in the right areas. My belt is fitting looser, but my pants in the quad area is not. Mm-hmm. So that's been a good 6 pounds. And so there's a little bit of momentum there that I'm building. So yeah, I guess the answer to this question really is what's it going to take? It's probably going to take momentum. It's going to take momentum of me building on this phase here and then being accountable to you guys as coaches. And then, of course, the results are going to happen. As long as I'm adhering and I'm executing the plan that you guys are laying out for me, that's going to build momentum. I'm going to get leaner. I'm going to see what getting leaner looks like. I'm going to see the Brad of 2011, 10, 9, 8 when I won my pro card and see those visible areas of shreddiness.
You see where this is going? He's going right on stage. You see where it's going? Momentum. Right to the stage.
I think that's the answer, right? It's going to take momentum. It's going to
take
momentum.
But I like it because basically when you decided like, okay, you know what? I'm just going to jump back into a bodybuilding lifestyle in a sense. Mm-hmm. Like, hey, I'm going to get back into like, okay, let me get my protein up. Mm-hmm. Make sure I get my training in.
Tracking my macros.
You're just like, just kind of just jumping into the process because you miss the lifestyle, the love of it. Not so much, you weren't doing it like, hey, I'm trying to go to the stage to win a title or win a show or any of that. You're just like, hey, let me just do this thing because I love to do it. Mm-hmm. And that, to me, that's the right way to do it. Because we've done preps where we've chased pro cards, we chased, all these wins and all this. And are we truly happy at the end of the day? I mean, it's more of like a temporary thing. Mm-hmm. It doesn't keep it going. So for me, it's always been the love of process always keeps me coming back.
Yeah.
And that's the same thing with progress. Like when you're chasing progress, it can be sometimes stressful. But when you love your training, you're going to do it regardless.
Yeah.
And if you love it, you're going to put your heart into it. You're going to be good at it. And then chances are progress follows.
Yeah. Yeah.
Inevitably.
That's ultimately what I've done at this point. It's been baby steps. It's like, okay, I've been training. I've been training this whole time now for years. But it was a little bit relaxed. Yeah, my weeks would sometimes take 11 days to get done. You know what I mean? First goal, let's get that down. Let's get to where these weeks take 7-8 days to get done.
Yeah.
Then it was kind of like, I never do anything more than about 6-7 repetitions, Well, maybe I start doing some sets where I'm actually putting in 10 repetitions, 12 repetitions, The instinctive lifting that we talked about earlier. Maybe now, instead of just doing that on my bench presses and my squats, maybe I do that on everything. I do that on my side lateral raises. I do that on my curls. I do that on my pull downs. I do that on everything, And so it's just been, the momentum's been kind of building, and it's gotten me to where I'm at right now. And what's going to get me on stage is where it keeps building. And,
I think you keep letting it flow naturally and not try to force it.
That's what's been happening now.
I think you try to force it, then it's like, then that's when a little bit of resentment might creep in there. Mm-hmm. So I think you just let that, like you said, momentum comes organically. It's going to come. And I think if you do, let's say, get to a point where, because you get to a certain point, you're like, ooh, I'm in striking distance now. I'm at that point where I can really just, okay, I'm here. I can go all the way now. Like I think at that point, you're going to know more or less if you truly want to take it all the way.
Yeah. And some of that's going to be, I'm going to need to kind of lean on you guys though too, because we always get to that point of prep where we kind of lose our mind a little bit, and the momentum might be there, and I'm fighting it. I'm comparing myself to other people, and I'm comparing myself even to maybe what I was doing, back when I was 190, 200 pounds. And you guys are just gonna have to get in my face. I'm like, look, Brad, here's the deal. You're right there. Just suck it up and do it.
You're already there, in my opinion. Now you're there. So I mean, we just go. I'm being selfish now because I want you to get on stage with me so we can have fun. Like I want to be like when I'm retired on my rocking chair, going, "Hey, Brad, call you up on the phone. Remember
in 2022?
Remember 2006 when we first met in Chico?
Yeah.
So
2022, and we, 18 years later, or however long.
So yeah, selfish reasons. I want you to get back on stage. If I have to put all my money in one way or another, you're going to be on a stage this year in 2022. I'm going to say you are.
Mm-hmm. That's an awful lot of confidence in me there, Jeffrey.
That's it.
But ultimately, yeah, it's going to take momentum. And what's got me started is just because I want to do it. I want to do it. I visited hunger. I'm not going to be at all upset if I'm hungry all the time. In fact, I'm going to kind of look forward to the day when that happens. And believe it or not, it's kind of a pain right now, but I'm enjoying tracking my macros. And you know what? It's going to be kind of fun when I've got to figure out how to hit a certain amount of macros at the end of the day that you guys give me. And I end up finding out that I need 1 egg, 40 grams of egg whites, and, 2 gummy bears or something like that.
Yeah. It's a, to me, like going through a prep, it gives me purpose. It's cool to be shredded and all that and to get on stage and compete, but there's I look at it as a vehicle. Like obviously we're doing a podcast right now because of what we're doing. So to me, it's it gives me purpose to try to help people. And oftentimes like what we do transcends, outside of just bodybuilding.
For sure. Yeah.
So that's part of my fuel.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, there we go. That's what it's going to take.
All right. So we'll see you on stage in 2022, Mr. America probably. So here we go. So I got the last one, right?
Yeah.
All right. So this particular person said, no questions, just a huge thank you for giving us older guys inspiration and hope. So really do appreciate that. Yeah. How do we talk about being older and still doing this thing?
My cheeks felt kind of red.
What's interesting is to me, it's like sometimes, especially from the younger crowd, they kind of look at us like, damn, that guy with a crooked back is squatting over 4 plates. Like, look at that old guy. He has no hair, and he has to wear glasses. But yeah, look at his physique. Like, they gotta be on something. Like, they think like after 40, like there's just no way you can like keep going, like keep progressing or maintain that level of a physique. And I think a lot of it's just myth, because I think the reason we're staying afloat here is because for the most part, we stay on top of our habits. Like we cover the big rocks more times than not. Like we do. I know you kind of fall short on protein, but I mean, most of us, we do our protein every day. We get enough. We're eating enough calories to support our training. We're not doing anything that's crazy. Like we're maintaining all the same things that we've maintained since we started. We've been consistent the entire time. So it's not like all of a sudden you hit 40 or even 50 in our case. Like all of a sudden now our body's like, hey, you're 40, we're going to lose muscle now. As long as you're maintaining that consistency throughout, then you can stay afloat for quite a while. I mean, inevitably, I'm sure, Father Time's going to catch up to us and we'll start deteriorating a little bit, but I don't think that's anytime soon. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean...
That's your favorite one. What's your thoughts?
Thoughts on thoughts. I feel like some effort has to be made there. Sure, I love just sitting on the couch doing nothing and watching TikTok, But when it gets in the way of my training, I got to make some effort and I got to do something, because I love my training a lot more than I love TikTok. And I kind of found out the hard way that if I waited until the afternoon and the evening to do my training, as much as I love it, it was easier to put it off until the next day. And I needed to do something to make it more enjoyable for me. And ultimately that I got more enjoyment out of it. So I started doing it in the morning, get up in the morning, scroll on TikTok for a few minutes, have a cup of coffee. I'm in there 8, 9, 9:30 at the latest, get it done. And man, it's been fun. It has been fun to get in there and train. And it's kind of rekindled my roots way back when I used to train at 4:30 and 5 in the morning, and I used to brag probably inappropriately that I was doing more work before anybody even got out of bed, and all that kind of
You definitely were before
stuff.
I did. That's for sure.
But yeah, you're right, Jeff. I mean, we live it, and it's not like, I don't think anytime soon is my body just going to go, I can't do this anymore. I think there may be a decline. Maybe I can't do 4 plates, but I'll be able to do 3.5.
Yeah.
Maybe I won't be able to do 3.5 plates, but I'll be able to do 3, I enjoy being strong. I enjoy the hard of lifting, I guess you might say. I don't know. It's something I really can't put into words and explain to somebody why it is that I do what I do, why I put in the effort of making my own gym. Except I don't know. I really, really enjoy doing it. It gives me purpose.
Like when I was when right before Ethan was born, I took 4 months off from the gym.
Remember
right?
vividly, yeah.
What happened to my physique when I did that? I deteriorated. Like, I lost muscle, I atrophied, and because I wasn't staying on top of my nutrition, I was just eating whatever, fast food and stuff like that. I just let go of all my structure with bodybuilding. I let go of the training, I let go of nutrition. I lost muscle mass and I gained body fat. It was the worst body composition I ever had in my entire life. And it wasn't because of my age. It was because I let go of all the bodybuilding habits, the bodybuilding lifestyle.
Yeah.
And then once I realized, like, I'm unhappy. Like I don't like the way I look. It's making me unhappy. I need to do something about this. I need to get back into training. So I got back into training. I started lifting again, and I didn't like go on a diet to try to lose body fat. I was like, hey, let me just get this muscle back. And like a month later, I got the muscle back, and then down the road, of course, I dieted down. But the point is that it wasn't my age wasn't the reason why I deteriorated. It was because I wasn't following through on my structure.
Yeah. There again, you had to take that little bit of effort to say, okay, enough is enough. That hardship is behind me. But yeah, I remember vividly when you started getting back into that, because yourself, Alberto, and I were at a gym in Sacramento, I think in Elk Grove to be exact. And I remember you were wearing a San Francisco Giants shirt, and you'd only been...
I don't even like the Giants either. Go figure.
But you'd only been in the gym for like a week or two, and it was just like...
No, I was in there a month.
Was it a month?
It was about a month.
Okay, I knew you'd been in there for a certain... And it was just like you were back again.
Oh, yeah. Came back like that.
Exactly. It's just like you'd never even left and taken that time off, Yeah. And so I remember that so vividly, and that's what really kind of drove into my point that you're not going to shrink in a week or 2 weeks off from training for a vacation or kind of whatever. Because I mean that's another thing that's kept our habits up, is that we respect our time away, and when it's time to get back, it's time to get back.
Yeah.
I don't worry about what's gone on behind me. I don't worry about that I missed that time. I don't stress over what am I going to do when I get there. I just get back in there and I start doing it. Yeah.
Just let it flow.
We're at the end of our questions.
That is it.
Yeah.
I'm going to say crush it one more time. One more time. We crushed it.
I feel very good about that. I feel very good. And I have to say that I just enjoyed the conversation. So hope that you guys did too.
That's it. Thanks for watching. Thanks for the questions. And welcome to my house.